That's right. You're watching the Arsenal Review USA podcast. It's the podcast for the American Gooner in association with Arsenal America. You can find more about us at arsenalreviewusa.com. And it's definitely spring. Arsenal playing like it's spring. Because who kicks up their feet better than Arsenal in the springtime? It doesn't matter if they're sixth place, seventh place, first place, third place, fourth, or on the cusp of I don't know what they've been on the cusp of over the years. I've lost track. They've really done the entire gamut, Kyle, when it comes to springtime play. But either way, they really just no one relaxes better than Arsenal in the springtime, whatever the circumstance. And that was definitely the case this last week. We're coming to you at a kind of weird time, right before a Southampton game. And let's see, we've got CSKA Moscow, and of course last week's game, Stoke. We missed you last week, some travel issues. Some travel. Apologies for the natural lighting that seems to have taken over my setting here today. No blinds to speak of. Just at the mercy of this beautiful Michigan spring. It's about 28 degrees right now. So anyway, Arsenal played and beat Stoke and then Moscow. On the face of it, on paper, two great games, two great scorelines. The Stoke game, I have to say, the worst game I've seen from Arsenal. There's been a lot of. It's easy to pile on the criticism for Arsenal, certainly this season. I'm not prepared to do that with this game, but from both teams, easily a collective effort went into making this the worst game I've seen in months, maybe all season from any two Premier League teams facing up. I don't know how you felt about the Stoke game, Kyle, but it was like stab your eyeballs out bad for the first 70 or so minutes. The last 20 minutes were excellent from Arsenal. But
I think you have to remember that Arsenal are not a great team when it comes to coming back from a long layoff, whether it be an international break or whatnot, which is often why you want a good run of results before they go into that break. Oftentimes because you might not see the best Arsenal squads come out of those breaks. Now, there was a longer break, I think, for them, given that the Leicester game got canceled for whatever reason it was. So they had a 15, 16, 17-day layoff from when they beat AC Milan 3-0 at home, or 3-1, or whatever, I guess a 3-1 at home, to when they played Stoke on April Fools. So I guess the April Fools for all Arsenal fans out there was that Arsenal were going to come back refreshed, ready to go, up for scoring boatloads of goals against the always terrible Stoke, or always not terrible in form, but terrible just in nature and character and so forth.
Yes, as people, but also lately.
All around a terrible. I mean, in the end, 3-0, I think maybe a little generous based on what you saw early on in the games, particularly in the first half, where, of course, if you flip the two games that we saw this week, great from Arsenal in the first half against Moscow, and not so great, or a little bit more boring, I guess you could say, in the second half. But no, I think I have to agree with you that the overall flow and excitement factor or entertainment factor around the Stoke and Arsenal game was definitely left something to be desired. But
it was just you always expect that from post international game. International breaks, like you said, but it was exceptionally bad. The way there was just no cohesion. I could count on one hand the number of times 3 passes were interchanged before something went spectacularly bad for either team in terms of holding possession. And it looked like it was going to stay that way for some time, but then out of nowhere, Mesut Ozil getting that penalty that we so rarely get from him. Has he won a lot of penalties? Maybe I'm just missing some really obvious stat that he's won Arsenal a ton of penalties this season, because I feel like he hasn't. And I feel like if he was going to break that duck, it wasn't that penalty, because it was on paper, on the first viewing, fairly soft penalty. Am I going out on a limb by describing it as such?
No, I mean,
you've seen them given.
Yeah, I guess
them given. It was one of
it's given. We've talked about this scenario before. Of that is definitely the sort of challenge and scenario that Arsenal would have had a penalty called against them in the past. So why not switch it around for us once in a while. Given the opponent, I have obviously, well, anytime Arsenal is going to win a penalty like that, I have no issue with it. Right. But it was kind of emphasize or put a little bit more the whole performance of the whole tie in general under a microscope a little bit more. Had the game been a lot, very back and forth, had there been maybe some challenges early on in the game that had gone uncalled, that should have been penalties, I could understand why people would have no issue with it whatsoever. But given that it was kind of maybe the first of its kind in the match, maybe a little bit surprised that it was given, but ultimately you have to think back now here to March 4th when we lost to Brighton away following the 3-0 and back-to-back 3-0s against Man City. Arsenal haven't lost in over a month. Granted, we have had the long layoff, but we're 4 on the trot now, I think, with the Watford. 5, because Watford, then both matches against AC Milan, Stoke, and then Moscow now. So 5 wins in 5 for Arsenal dating back to March 4th. So well over a month. So anything like a soft penalty to Mesut Ozil, to get you, to help you stay on that streak and continue on here as we roll up to what we hope will be a Europa League semifinal and final here in the coming months, or a month and a half, is not a bad thing. So I'll take it all day long.
Yeah. And so that, obviously that's how it ended up, Arsenal winning comfortably on paper in the end 3-0 with some good confidence boosting, hopefully, for Lacazette, who's been like the forgotten child of Arsenal for the last several months here. Many thinking he's going to leave in the summer now that we've got Aubameyang. In the end, it was good to see Arsenal get a win over Stoke, like you said, terrible people in the first place, but also just because they haven't been performing that well. Nice to see them get that win and actually beat the teams they should be beating, because they definitely beat the teams that they shouldn't be beating this season. So, excuse me. Although, if you say that one of those teams maybe was CSKA Moscow, you're proven wrong later in the week when they went on a 4-1 tear against them, which was a much more exciting game, much more end-to-end game, a lot of back and forth, a lot of chances for Moscow in the beginning of the game. And they had a really good chance to actually equalize from scoring. And Aaron Ramsey, again, this just goes to my theory that Arsenal, no matter what the situation, they get really, really comfortable, or at least they feel no pressure for some reason from April to May. He's definitely one of those players I feel like who feels no pressure at this point of the season. And not in a bad way, but just, he plays much better typically. Even in seasons where he's been injured, he just comes back in the spring for some reason and scores. And he was definitely the star of this game. Now, if I'm forgetting something here, or maybe losing track of his contract situation, he's got his contract up soon, yeah?
I think there's 1 year left on it. It's
definitely need to renew it, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think it's summer 2019. We would have heard a lot more about it, I think, in tandem with the Ozil and Sanchez situation. Obviously, Ozil re-signing and Sanchez leaving. But if it had been a scenario where he was leaving on a free this summer, then I'm sure it would be crunch time and there would be a lot more discussion around it. But I will say one thing. It does seem like, and I'm not accusing Aaron Ramsey of playing better because he's in a contract year. And that, because that really is true with all athletes across all sports. It's not just a Arsenal player thing. But I will admit that it is slightly annoying that, here's a guy that is really the epitome of in form or not in form. And there's really no in between, I feel like, with Aaron Ramsey. He's either the best player on the pitch for the most part on either side, or completely anonymous in the games that he's playing, and it doesn't really give us a whole lot of help. And while I think Arsenal should re-sign him, it is kind of that annoying thing. It's like, oh, of course now you're playing well, when 2 months ago we really needed the whole squad to step up. And
so in terms of the business transaction or the business value, like re-signing him would not necessarily guarantee consistency. It would just be like, oh, our precious Aaron Ramsey gets to stay here. I
Yeah.
mean, and first of all, who would? I mean, playing devil's advocate, who would pick him up? Is there a lot of demand? If you're Aaron Ramsey thinking like, well, I got to remind Arsenal that there's other teams definitely interested in me.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
been
I think
several times that other teams are wary of picking up Arsenal players, at least favored Arsenal, who uh, are not who are on a higher than average salary than they would be were they plying their trade and plying their trade well for, say, a middle to slightly above middle of the table Premiership team. You know what I mean? Like it's really hard to match the wages that Arsenal have going, even if you're not a great player for Arsenal, even if you're not um, a featured player for Arsenal, you're going to be on better wages than you typically are going to be at if you're, say, a star at like Everton or something. That's why it's taken Arsenal so long to offload certain players. So all that being said, I don't know. I think any motivation Arsenal would have to keep Aaron Ramsey would be predominantly, I'm just going to throw this out there, predominantly sentimental in nature rather than, oh my gosh, like if you leave, like that's just a huge cavity in our team. On the basis now, on the basis of the CSKA Moscow game, that would be like a huge, like, oh, there's a hole in our team now that you're gone. I don't know if you could say, based on the last like 2-3 seasons, that would necessarily be the case. Certainly after the losses that we've incurred with
Sanchez. Yeah.
And others.
Yeah.
There's not really anything near that same kind of feeling with Aaron Ramsey should Arsenal let his contract run up.
Yeah, I think with Aaron Ramsey, we've hit the sentimental zone. He's been with the club now.
We've been in the sentimental zone for some time with
him. And not that I want to go back to this, we've probably been in the sentimental zone since he broke his leg, which was 2 years after we signed him. Actually, it may have been less than that. He wasn't a January guy, was he? No.
A January trade? No, I don't believe so.
No, so it was 18 months after we signed him because we signed him in 2008, summer of 2008, and he broke his leg in February of 2010. 18 months after we signed him.
Was it 2010 or 2009? 2009.
It was 2010.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Because it was. I remember we had actually, just a little dating ourselves here. We had just started the podcast the preceding fall or Thanksgiving. So that was like one of the first main events of the podcast was chronicling the Savage attack.
His first game back, if you all remember, he scored the winner against Man United, second to last game of the Premier League season in the 2010-11 campaign. So May of 2011 is when he came back. So out for 14 months with the injury. But all that said, very much like a Theo Walcott, Theo being here 12 years, moving on to Everton, no ill will given towards him, and really hadn't gotten any better over the years. If anything, you could argue that he had gotten maybe a little worse as a player in terms of his touch and maybe not quite as fast as he once was. Now, you can't necessarily say the same with Aaron Ramsey because he's slightly younger, for one. If I'm accurate there, I think I am. And also, oftentimes more consistent. And his bad games weren't nearly as bad as what you saw from Theo, I think, over the years before he left. All that said, fantastic performance against Moscow. Great finish on that second goal of his, to really put the game away at 3-1. And, he's the type of guy, if we can start seeing maybe in his now what seems – I think his prime years here coming up, he's 26, I want to say, 27. Does that sound right? Because we signed him as he would be 20.
Let me Google that for you.
27, I think, because we signed him as a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old. Yeah, so he's 26 or 27. And this isn't always an arguable thing based on who the player is, but you talk about the 26 to 29, 30 range as being the prime years for a professional footballer, probably definitely within the English Premier League. And, maybe with a nice fat new contract and a few more pieces around him, if Arsenal can get their act together, and hopefully Mkhitaryan isn't out for too long. With, going along with that, Aaron Ramsey can become that consistent player that helps us kind of lead the midfield going forward, because he certainly is a potent threat and scores a lot of goals when he is in form. It would just be nice if that was about 80 to 90% of the time and not about 50-50.
Yeah, well, not to go. I mean, obviously, we got to talk about the Moscow game a little bit more, but
Yeah.
not to go into too much detail on the Ramsey conundrum. Obviously, you've heard us talk about him several times here on the podcast, and maybe gathered that we're not like the biggest fans. It's certainly not of his consistency or lack thereof. Yeah, so there's that. But to be fair to Aaron Ramsey, I think part of it has, or and again, we're talking about him now just after he had a phenomenal game.
Mm-hmm.
And,
well,
Moscow,
the point always
it's a
comes
different
up on
level.
him. Yeah, it's when he has a good game, people tend to go back to, who is he? What is the meaning of life? Around
Right. Very
this form of
existential,
Aaron Ramsey.
very
Yeah.
philosophical about Aaron Ramsey. And I understand. I don't want to get too philosophical about him, but as you said, and as we've said many times on the podcast, he is a potent offensive option for Arsenal, just in the way, even if he doesn't touch the ball, just the way he keeps other defenses honest and running in behind them and posing that threat. They have to track the run, so if someone actually tracks his run, now that's space available for some other attacker for Arsenal. So he works against the other team in a lot of different ways with movement. Obviously, he put paid to all that with some 2 great goals against Moscow. But when it comes to his defensive side of things, he's often been found wanting, and I almost wonder if if maybe we're a little too harsh on him there also, and it just needs to be it just comes down to Arsene Wenger and the management in Arsenal identifying his strengths and saying, you know what, he's like an Ozil. He's not going to play defense for us. We can't expect him to be this box to box midfield player who immediately plays sterling defense after making one of these gut-busting runs on offense. He's not going to get back and be, a world-class defensive midfielder. We need to accommodate him in the other midfielders we put around him. And maybe they've tried to do that a little bit with Xhaka, who is, a questionable defender at best. So that hasn't worked out. So, maybe sometimes he gets a little too much flack for a job or a management job that is effectively the management's job to do, rather than his to kind of try to spin more plates. I gotta go play good offense, then get back and play defense. Obviously, there's times where he, no matter what his job is, he needs to play better defense. That goes without saying in certain situations. But just overall, you almost wonder if he's being sold short by an Arsenal management team that will not give him the help he needs in defensive midfield, and is just expecting him to do that work, or maybe think it's not that important, whatever it is, because that's really the criticism. I mean, can you think of any criticism that he gets for his offense? I mean, even when he doesn't score, he has usually good games for Arsenal in that he keeps the other team's defense busy and in check. Usually all the criticism, I want to say 99% of the criticisms of Aaron Ramsey all come down to his defense or lack thereof. So, maybe we've been a little harsh with him.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this in his defense, and he's certainly been the topic of conversation on this podcast, and it could be because, it's almost definitely because, one, he's back. He was out for a while. And 2, he's playing well. So just by nature, I think, of a lot of shows and blogs out there, you tend to pick apart the form, as we've already said, of your, most informed player at the time, especially when they've been with a club for 10 seasons now, and have done a lot of good things, and have maybe not done certain things that you hope they would have. But I will say in his defense that you're looking at a guy, like you said, Joel, that has not been given the sort of support that he would need to fit his game from a defensive midfield standpoint. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of that has fallen squarely on Xhaka's shoulders, maybe fairly and unfairly towards him. And he's certainly not the greatest defender in the world, but he definitely keeps the flow offensively going forward. So we really do have that going for us at Arsenal, our central midfield if you want to put it that way, more than really a defensive midfield pairing. The central midfielders offensively are very strong. They know what they want to do with the ball. They make good runs. The passing tends to be pretty sharp and crisp. But from a defensive point of view, it's never really been there during Aaron Ramsey's time at Arsenal. So he kind of gets folded into this idea that Arsenal just don't have a defensive midfield, which tends to be true. And Aaron Ramsey is a central midfielder, so therefore, by default, Aaron Ramsey is not a good, is not a good defender and has never really, not I don't want to say given the chance, but has never really been put in a position to excel when it comes to defending in the midfield. So, we sit here and talk about what the options are and where Arsenal are, how they're looking in the central of midfield. I mean, because think about Jack Wilshere as well. I mean, he plays central midfield at Arsenal, but I wouldn't call him a defensive midfielder, and I wouldn't call him a great offensive player either. But on his day, he maintains the flow of play. He puts in some crunching tackles, maybe unwisely at times, but nonetheless tend to be effective. He acts. He plays bigger than he is physically, which I think is good. And, I don't think there's any really, when it comes to the central of midfield, year after year, we've kind of talked about it. We haven't found yet the Gilberto replacement, the Vieira replacement, that true horse in the middle of the field that, might give you some goals down the road, but is primarily looked at as a defensive midfield player, and the offensive production that you might get from that player is a nice added bonus. Whereas it's almost the complete opposite today. You have players like Ramsey and Xhaka that are primarily offensive players, push forward when they get the ball. And the defensive side of things, it's nice when you see them play a game where they're controlling the center of midfield and not letting the opposing team through on every single counterattack and so forth. So it is kind of the exact opposite of we've seen over the years or early on in Wenger's career or tenure at Arsenal, where defense first, offense is an added bonus, whereas now it's offense first, defense is the added bonus. And I'm fine if we score 5, 6, 7 goals a game, but oftentimes Arsenal can't break through on the offensive end either, even though they have 30 shots in a match. They're only scoring 2 or 3 goals, and unfortunately we're conceding the same amount. But like I already said, I think the real positive here, and I don't want this negative aspect of critiquing where Arsenal have been and the players they have at their disposal to overshadow the fact that we haven't lost since March 4th. We are well on our way to the semifinal of the Europa League. Fingers crossed with this return leg coming up here in a matter of days in Moscow. But you'd have to think, based on the 4-1 win at home, that even a draw of in some shape or form shouldn't be too hard to come by in Moscow, depending on who the personnel on that return or in that return leg is going to be for Arsenal. And hopefully we'll see ourselves here in a semifinal coming up here in another couple weeks.
We mentioned Moscow. Obviously, we haven't really gone into detail on that game. It was we mentioned it a little bit when we talked about Ramsey's goals, and then went off on the Aaron Ramsey tangent. But I mean, it was a great game. Arsenal continued to embrace the alternate reality that is the Europa League, with another great performance, and just kind of forget all the badness that preceded it in so many other competitions and so many other games this season. In the end, 4-1, great goals it was just Ramsey and Lacazette now that I think of it. Lacazette with another pen, Ozil winning another pen, Ramsey with that crazy back heel, which, I don't know, is that not to take anything away from this, is that the easiest back heel?
As compared to what, I guess?
Or not to score. Obviously, to put that kind of placement like he did was insane. But people were saying when Giroud scored, his scorpion kick, that was the easier technique of the back heel, where it comes off kind of like the not directly back portion of your heel, the kind of like the side. You know, you kind of flick it almost with the side of your boot, which will
Mm-hmm.
be clicking in a little bit. So it's more of like a, you know, this is not my foot if you haven't figured that out. So it's hard to draw a parallel, illustrate it with my hand. But
Um,
you know what I mean. It's not direct at the back. Whereas Mkhitaryan's for Manchester United, it was like a week before Giroud's, I remember,
yeah.
and his was like direct back of the heel, like a lot of velocity placed on it, more of a shot, an actual shot, than a flick or a looping, you know, contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his was like power, and it was all like the back of the heel.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Now remind me for the Aaron Ramsey goal, which direction did the ball come in from? Because that
Well,
plays in
came
a lot to the
came
impressiveness
Okay, so
of
I say this is great that we're doing this
yeah. This is
on
riveting stuff. So pay attention,
to
folks.
I'm just gonna actually step back here and recreate the goal exactly. Actually, I'm not. I'm gonna just like say that it came from the left flank.
Yeah.
It came from the left flank in, and so say you the viewer are the goal. You're the goalie facing me. Ramsey turned with his right leg. For everyone who's seen this, they know exactly. But like he turned with his right leg, and it hit. I'm resisting the urge to like put my leg up on my desk. It hit the back, kind of, not so much the back heel, but the back side of his right foot, and
Mm-hmm.
then looped up
Yeah.
over the goalie.
Okay. So I was trying to
Purely
remember if it.
intentional,
I
not
was
at
trying to
all,
remember
not
if
at
it
all
was
an
kind of
accident.
more of a rebound or more straight on for him. And I would say
No,
that
it was kind of coming over his shoulder. Then he let
yeah,
it come down to his.
yeah, being
Over
a
his shoulder.
right-footed player myself, I would say, thinking about like a cross coming in from the right side and being able to kind of look over your shoulder and time it that way as opposed to having it come at you. Anytime an object is coming at you, it's I think it's harder to judge and get your body prepared to do something positive with it. So
Yeah. Okay.
being reminded now that it came in from the left-hand side, pretty impressive in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. So that's courtesy of our little Bill Nye
Yeah. Thanks for
Mythbusters.
the yeah. So if you're
Podcast.
listening to the podcast only, did not see the live show or have not watched the video, go to our YouTube channel and make sure you check out Joel's recreation of the Aaron Ramsey goal because you'll totally if you didn't see the Ramsey goal, I would I would encourage you to watch Joel's recreation first and then you'll be like, oh okay, that makes sense when you go see the real thing.
Even though
So
I didn't utilize any kind of foot action or illustration other than my hands and like turning my body. Yeah, okay. Sorry for everyone who has suffered through, who knows exactly, you know, who knows exactly in their mind how the goal played out. Anyway, so that was the second or third goal.
that was the third.
Third,
Yep.
third goal, and then Lacazette had a peach of a goal for the fourth goal. He kind of took his
Mm-hmm.
time to get it left foot, and then just arrowed it low into the left hand side of the goal. So overall, a good blitz there from Arsenal, who maybe gave CSKA Moscow too many chances, but the long and short of it is, like you said, it's 4-1. They get to take that aggregate into the next game in Moscow, and that bodes well for them. So, yeah, what more can you say about the Europa League? It's panning out exactly as everyone hoped it would. All right, so CSKA Moscow, what's your prediction for that game? Well, okay, first of all, we've got Southampton tomorrow. What's your
Mm-hmm.
prediction for the Southampton game, Kyle?
That is going to be 2-1 Arsenal.
Oh, okay. And that's at
Other,
Arsenal.
correct.
Yeah. So Kyle says 2-1. I will say it's at home. Arsenal's feeling good, but they'll rest a bunch of people probably. Well, will they rest people? Because I can't say with certainty that they'll, break out all the stops for the return leg against CSK. CSKA, I don't want to say A. CSKA. Moscow on, later that week. So I'm going to say it's 3-1. 3-1 win for Arsenal. And then Moscow, I'm still going to say 2-3-1 wins here for Arsenal. So another 3-1. Another 3-1. What do you say?
Um, I think 3-1. I'll stick with 2-1. 2-1 for Arsenal against Moscow.
So we're doubling up on score lines. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You got 2-1s. I got 2-3-1s, and that's that. Do we have any contest information, results, information, stuff for our listeners/viewers?
Well, we did do a contest via Twitter last week that we had a winner from that particular contest. So I guess congrats to Ryan, is the person that won that scarf, courtesy of roughneckscarves.com. I don't actually know if I've brought it up since made the announcements a couple of times. No one really cared, I don't think. But I was supposed to be going to the Southampton match, but will not because it got moved back to Sunday. So thanks a lot to the TV group and everyone involved in that decision. There is a ticket available if anyone wants it. Buddy over there has it on a family member's membership card. But anyway, if you're hearing this in time, it doesn't matter. But I actually am going to be in London Monday during the day before I go on to all the work stuff that I have to be a part of. And then I'm going to be back for the Burnley match. That is a given because the flight will work out regardless of whether it stays on Saturday or moves to Sunday if we progress in the Europa League. All that said, we'll have some time to do another contest on social media, probably on Twitter again, for everyone because didn't really have a trivia question prepared. So just keep your eyes open on the social channels, and we'll get something out for everyone there.
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, a lot coming up for Arsenal. Obviously, we've got Southampton tomorrow and CSKA Moscow later in the week, which of course Arsenal play both their games at home time round. Yeah. I mean, there's not much more you can say at the end of a crazy season for Arsenal. Like crazy bad in a lot of ways, but crazy nonetheless. You really have to get behind the Europa League now. You really have to get into it. As hard as it is to watch those games on Thursday.
Yeah.
Time.
Do you also want to predict?
Season's all about.
Do you also want to predict, Joel, the Newcastle match, which is next Sunday?
Oh crap. Yeah, because you're going to be out of the country, aren't you?
No, I'll be back. I'll be back on Friday, this Friday. But I can't imagine that we'll do another show Thursday prior to the Newcastle match.
Okay, go ahead.
So that is at St. James Park. Newcastle is generally awful.
They're okay.
Yeah.
They're like scrappy. They're scrappy.
Yeah, so I'm going to say 1-1, unfortunately, for that one.
That's what I already had written down for me. 1-1. 1-1 draw. Okay. Yeah, Rafa Benitez has them like in the siege mentality every week, so they're actually playing okay.
Right.
And since there are much worse teams around them, I could see them staying up.
Yeah.
So, hopefully Stoke goes down. Maybe this will finally be the season that Stoke goes down. But it's that crazy time of the year, spring, where Arsenal does well. Other teams, unfortunately, are lately doing better. But no matter what, there's I think the light at the end of the tunnel in whether it's the end of the Premiership or FA Cup finals, all kinds of finals, is what I don't know. It just it lifts everybody's spirits a little bit, and it's just yeah.
Well,
for me, it's always the FA Cup this time of year. Obviously, that's out of the off the table for Arsenal. But for me, it's always the FA Cup that you have to look forward to, and that's like the segue from spring into summer that you really love. Your mind goes back to 1998 when that was like the big transition out of the league campaign into then that year, obviously the World Cup, and that was just wow, Arsenal won the FA Cup. Now you can go out, play in the pool, do all the stupid things, and we go to soccer camp. All the stupid things you're gonna do before the World Cup starts. I don't know. So I guess this season it will have to be the Europa League final. When is the Europa League final?
I believe it's May 19th. Might be the 16th, but I want to say May 19th.
Later, yeah.
Yeah. So they had rescheduled the Leicester match for in between Burnley and Huddersfield Town, and I think
it's 16th, May 16th is the final. I'm seeing on the Googles.
but just a few days after actually the final Premier League match. So yeah, so they have 2 days off. So May 13th is the final day where all the teams play the Premier League. That'll be away to Huddersfield Town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's actually quite a bit of fixture congestion for Arsenal throughout the month of May. They play the second leg of the semifinal of the Europa League, assuming that they make it there on Thursday, May 3rd. And then they'll play Burnley on the weekend, Leicester City midweek in that makeup game, Huddersfield Town on that next weekend, and then midweek the following week will be that final if indeed they make it there. So hopefully they'll have the legs for it. Finishing up here, and of course not totally mail it in when it comes to the Premier League, because that wouldn't be good either. And but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Okay, then our parting words to you: we'll see what happens. Well, at least for the next week, anyway. We'll probably get in touch with you on that Sunday, I guess, right, Cal? After the Newcastle game with these 3 games, a lot of games: Southampton, CSKA, Moscow, and Newcastle. So we'll get in touch with you on the other side of those games on the next podcast / live show. I don't know. We'll keep you on your toes. Either way, until then, as always, remember, support the Arsenal and have a good week.